All right, so I'm here with composers Bob Bassett and Quentin Marchetti to talk briefly about a project they reached out to us with back in September called the CO-19 project. And this is a collaborative composition project between 19 composers across the country. And they all came together to write a single collage for a string quartet during the COVID-19 pandemic. Quentin Marchetti is a Denver-based composer interested in bringing communities together through innovative music in different settings. And as a recent graduate of DU, he has been seeking out ways to make music outside of the academic community. He also sits on the board of the Wild Beautiful Orchestra, a new ensemble dedicated to performing classical and popular music for different communities. And most recently, he has been co-leading a project called Singing Our Truth, which brings together performers and composers to create an original text and record it virtually. Bob Bassett is also a Denver-based composer as well as a pianist, and he has degrees from CU Boulder and the California Institute of the Arts. He has had compositions premiered at the Creative Composers Retreat in Dublin, New Hampshire, and the Walden School's Composer Forum. He also composed a film score for the Magnificent 14-Year-Olds, which won the Audience Choice Awards at the 2019 Denver 48-Hour Film Festival. As a pianist, he has performed with the Fillmore Trio, violin soloist Lena Waite, and with the Colorado Jazz Workshop and the Sobo Jazz Quartet. Welcome, Bob and Quentin. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So can you, other than what I've mentioned about your backgrounds, can you tell us a little bit about each of yourselves and how the two of you met?
Sure. I guess I'll talk about myself a little bit and kind of segue into how me and Bob met. I was born in Monument, Colorado. I'm kind of a Colorado native. I've just finished up at DU. I've been exploring lots of different types of music there, but I've been really excited by collaborative compositions and things that are just a little bit more accessible maybe than what's happening in the academic field. And that really got inspired in me because I got to see other composers doing it at the Walden School in Dublin, New Hampshire, which I attended not this last summer, but 2 summers ago. And that's where I met Bob, and we had a really great time. It was incredible. We had to go across the country to learn that we lived down the street from each other. But there was an environment of real collaboration there and just willingness to experiment. And it was great to see music that was not as thorny and intellectual as a lot of the stuff I had been seeing in school, and that composers who had come out of an academic setting could make that music. That was exciting to me, and to see people who were not professional musicians composing and making music, and it was great, and just enjoying it. That really inspired me, and me and Bob connected there, and he can talk a little bit about himself now.
Nice. Yeah. Let's hear from you, Bob.
Well, I'm quite a ways from the academic composing situation, having received my degrees several years ago, but got back into composing. And as Quentin said, Walden was an amazing experience because of the acceptance of everyone, regardless of age or background. And several of us there consider ourselves to be emerging composers, but not your typical 20-year-old emerging composer of a different era. And Quentin and I got to meet each other there and worked on a piece there that he'll tell you about. And it's been a fantastic experience since then as I try to explore composition outside of the academic setting at this point in my life.
So what other composers do you both gain inspiration from that aren't your typical academic composer?
Well, let me go first, Quentin.
Okay.
I've been listening to a lot of Lou Harrison, whom I recently, who I met while I was at Cal Arts. Of course, along with John Cage, who I also met, George Crumb, and the current composers that are more in that ilk, outside of, as Quentin said, the noise composers that often appear in academia, which I understand. I mean, there's a certain requirement that they produce a certain kind of music in order to follow their academic careers. But recently heard a concert by the Avalos Quartet out of CU, who did a lot of Julie Montgomery work, which I really enjoyed. And there's a lot of composers right now that are doing stuff that is much more accessible than a lot of the academic work.
What about you, Quentin?
I never have a good answer because I don't listen to a lot of music. It's kind of bizarre. I've never really understood it, but there's always something in my head all the time. So to sit down and listen to music is kind of hard. But I also really enjoy George Crumb, and I know he really is an academic, but his music avoids that a lot of the time. I think the essence of Ligeti I really like. A lot of his music is hard to listen to, but the ideas of just being exploring everything and trying new things and trying different sounds I've really enjoyed. It's hard to come up with composers I've been listening to. A lot of choral music. I was singing at an Episcopal church before all this started, and I got to hear all of these really interesting composers I had never really heard of that were writing music that it was tonal, but it did not sound like Mozart. You think that if you write something that's tonal, it's going to either sound like Eric Whitacre or, Beethoven. And it's just, there's so many people trying new things, and I can't think of any of their names, but I think choral music's an important thing for me to just, because it can't get too complicated. It kind of grounds me in can people sing it? Can people feel it? Would they enjoy singing it? And then I apply that not only to, writing vocal music, but to all kinds of instruments.
That's awesome. Great. So tell me what CO-19 stands for, or maybe that's obvious, but tell me how you came up with that name, and also how you got the project started and how you found all of the composers that you collaborated with.
Let me explain the name, and then Quentin can tell us how we got started. CO-19, of course, the CO could stand for collaboration, could stand for composers. It could stand for many different things, as well as COVID. But of course, it's a little cute, but to say CO-19, it's a composition, it's a collaboration, it's cooperation. It's all of those things that we came together really at the beginning of the pandemic back in March and April to express our feelings. But Quentin, why don't you talk about where the whole idea came from?
Yeah, no, at Walden 2 summers ago when we were there, I don't know what started the idea, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had a piece for cello that everyone had taken apart in writing? So I got a big piece of that 11 by 17 staff paper and drew out like 50 sections or something. I think ended up being 43 different sections of equal size. And they weren't bar lines, they were just sections. And I went around throughout the entire week and said, hey, could you put just a little section of this cello piece in here? And at first it was just kind of a cool idea. I only wanted the students or, the people who were attending to be involved, but I got a lot of the faculty to put some stuff on there. I tried to get George Lewis. He didn't want to put anything on there. But it was so cool because as it developed, each composer could see what else was there. It wasn't just they weren't just writing some music. They could see, oh, that happened before me. Someone wrote some kind of silly stage direction here, so I'm going to contrast with this, or I'm going to do this. And the score is beautiful. That's my favorite part, is there's just all these composers and all of their different handwriting and style of notation and different experimental techniques.
And so this was a previous piece for solo cello that you had done at Walden, right?
Yes, and that was kind of the idea, because Bob reached out to me and said, I really liked that idea. Why don't we do that with a string quartet? Because everyone's away from home, and we'll try to do something similar to that. And we really drew from the people at Walden for most of the participants.
And I had a follow-up question, and now it's leaving me. Did you specifically choose the string quartet due to the pandemic, or did you have other instruments in mind at first, or what was your reasoning for using string quartet?
I think I had recently in February been at a composers forum in San Francisco where 10 of us got to premiere our string quartets by the Del Sol Quartet, including mine, which was on the program, the last one on the program. And so that was fresh in my mind. And it seemed that a lot of us had some exposure or some experience with string quartets. And following Quentin's idea with the cello piece, wouldn't it be fun if each of us wrote about 30 seconds of music and then put it together as a collage? And I reached out to Quentin, and he thought that was a pretty keen idea. So we sent emails out to, I don't know, 25, 30 different people. And at the end of the day, we had 19 respondents, and that worked out wonderfully with the name.
Mm-hmm.
And there we go. We ended up with 5 composers from Colorado: Quentin, myself, Adam Waite, who is the minister of music at Montview Presbyterian Church, Michael Frank, who's a physician in town, recently got his undergraduate degree in addition from Regis by studying with Loretta Nodoretsky, and M. Eliason, who was the audio engineer on the film, the 48-hour film that you mentioned that I did. And she did the realization of the CO-19 audio version, which is wonderful and is on the website. And I know you've listened to as well, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just went from there. It took off.
Awesome. That's great. So now I will ask, what was the hardest part about putting this project together?
Quentin and I talked about this yesterday, and he was going to let me answer, so I will. The hardest part was really deciding what order these sections should go in. And Sarah, I can send you an email with a photograph of the bookcase behind me. Excuse me. The bookcase behind me with all of the submissions taped up on it. And so it was like a deck of cards. And I would shift them around and move them around. That was really the hardest part. Once that order was in place, then it was a question of, well, how do you get from one section to the next? And amazingly, that was relatively easy. As you know, there are a lot of held tones, there are some pauses, but each one of those then Quentin and I looked at and tweaked here and there. But once the order was set, then it was relatively easy.
And what kind of decisions did you use to decide the order?
What sounds good?
Yeah.
That was really it.
The various styles, maybe
Yeah.
contrasting or complementary, or
Exactly. Contrasting, complementary, what would flow. We'll hear the Playground Ensemble Quartet, and I think what you'll hear, and Quentin came up with this idea, you'll hear a pulse throughout the entire piece. No section is so long that it becomes dominant or becomes significantly different than the rest. It's a collage, and each section is of a certain length, but there's a pulse to the entire work that I think a lot of collaborations don't have because they're trying too hard or the sections are too long or something. But I'm amazed at how this flows together as an entire work.
yeah, so that actually leads into my next question, which was, did anything surprise you about the project? Or so the kind of the flow and the flow was a little bit more natural than maybe you originally expected?
Quentin, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I was a bit worried, honestly. Bob called me, with this idea, and we talked about it, and he did a lot of the work. I was there for moral support, and we bounced ideas off each other, but I was a little worried because there was, Walden especially, there were so many different composers doing so many different things. There's, I don't remember whose movement there is, but there's one that just it's like a Bach fugue. It follows all the rules. I mean, it's like
I think
perfect.
that's Michael's part, Michael Frank's.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And there's another part there's so many parts that are so different. Some are just taking totally contemporary techniques, others are not. And I was worried about that, but listening through it and looking through it, it was amazing how embracing the differences and just embracing this pause and all of that allowed it to just flow so easily because you accepted it. So this is a collage. It's not trying to be something else. It's not hiding what it is. It's a bunch of people who are passionate about music and who care about each other and who know each other, trying to create something despite how difficult it is to do anything during this pandemic. So that shone through, and I believe that that's so important when we're making music. It's just that the intention, it's going to come through, you know.
Was it nice to have a project during the early stages of the pandemic? I know that I was kind of like going stir crazy at home at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
It was good to have a project to work on. And I think that's a lot of what happened with everybody who was involved, was the appreciation of the fact that even though we were in various stages of lockdown around the country, we could still make some music and we could make it together and we could collaborate. And I think that was, that came through. Some people wrote brand new stuff for this. Some people reached back many years and came up with something that they'd always wanted to put forward. And so they contributed a few measures of that. And I think it was, as you said, all of a sudden this pandemic, the quarantines, the stay-at-home orders hit, and all of us wondered, what can we do now? Because music is such a collaborative thing and involves other people and is so much more rewarding with other people that we all wondered, what can we do now?
For sure. Yeah, good time. It's a perfect time for something like this. So my last question is, has this project inspired any other similar projects or maybe some other projects that are different, or what might you do differently, or kind of what's coming out of this?
Well, Quentin's got one project that he already mentioned. I'll let him talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, that's kind of related to that, but I think really what I'm getting from this and that other project you mentioned is this: we're still capable of doing things, and that as musicians, this collaboration is becoming more and more important for composers and performers. I think coming out of school, seeing this disconnect between performers and composers, that, you know, performers are playing music that's been written and that's seen as good, and composers are trying new things and they're not allowed to make mistakes. And, you know, it's so independent and, you know, alone. The idea of a composer is someone who's alone writing some masterpiece and then it comes out perfectly. And, you know, this really allowed me to see the process and allow other people to be involved and just be okay with the outcome. So I'd like to see, during the pandemic and past it, more collaboration between composers, more allowing other people to say, well, you know, what about this? Or I don't really like that part. Could you try changing that? Because I think that's going to help the whole culture of what has come out of classical music in today's world. We have to continue collaborating and making new things. We can't stay sticking around with the old or trying to just be, you know, trying to do everything by ourselves. We can't anymore. We don't live in the 18th century, you know, but we want to celebrate that history and celebrate the future that it has. So I think that collaboration is just so important. I'm so glad that we were able to get it performed by an ensemble that's realizing this exact thing during all of this. So it's really worked out nicely, and it's, despite all of my pessimism, it's been really exciting.
And let me just add to that very briefly. Since the Playground Ensemble Quartet took on this project, thank you guys for reaching back out to us with questions and with how should this be performed. And as you know, there were some typos in the score that we corrected. but there was also, and I think Quentin and I both really mean this, you are the performers. You know what's going to sound good. You guys working with us are going to make a beautiful piece out of this, and we're so excited to hear the result. And we thank you so much for taking on this project.
Yeah, our pleasure. Well, it was so nice to talk to you guys today. I really thank you for being here and for being a part of our Streamathon fundraiser today. And everyone, please enjoy the performance of the CO-19 project by the Playground String Quartet. Thanks.